Okay, I'm going to start my clock here. Not that I'm going to put myself on a clock. So hello, thank you for those. I'm sure there's a couple of people probably online, but yeah, it's funny. I certainly know how law enforcement is, having been in it for over 2 decades myself, and I'm sure many more people will watch the recordings. But so I'm Jeff Johnsgaard. My company is Training on Purpose by Design, and simply put, the reason for that is, as that little logo graphic dictates there or shows, there's a brain, and then as we move left to right, there's a software upgrade. So you can see a brain upgrade, and it's something that we can certainly talk about down the road, or if anyone wants to have more conversations on it. But expert performers, it's my opinion that expert performers, they don't really move faster, they move sooner. They move sooner by fractions of a second because they're attending to the right information, they're making accurate predictions, and they've coupled and linked that to concurrent activity, all sorts of reasons. But we have experts in our profession, absolutely, through studying them, 4 continents behind closed doors on 5 tier 1 organizations, all the way to, I call it like tier 99, recruits for the first week of recruit training. We've got these expert performers, but they didn't get there on purpose by design. It wasn't the lesson plan. They made individual adaptations in what was going on for them, and that actually can all be broken down and taught on purpose by design. So the protocols that I'm trying to push you towards applying, these evidence grounded and informed protocols that I'm pushing you towards applying and giving a try for yourself, you'll lose less people who didn't quite get it, and the rest of it. So with that, increasing officer safety, decision making, actions, it's an upgrade in their software. And that's something that's completely missed, or is just the hopeful residue of the training. So today's webinar is around attentional control and situational awareness. So this quadrants of attention idea. I would just come out and say, yes, it is webinar 2 of 9. It's selfish of me to even do these things because, in all honesty, I'm trying to get a bunch of information out there so that I can have higher quality discussions with trainers, with administrators, and the rest of it. Happily, yes, getting hired, to not only help train the trainer, but to, just help people under the constraints they have, the resources, the time, the whatever they have. How can we do better, as is evidenced by what? Well, the last webinar, this idea of retention and, more importantly, transfer. So these fancy words are not just fancy words, they're an entire framework. And this session, as I said, I wouldn't really call it a training. I'm going to put a bunch of information out there, hoping that you're going to maybe even watch it a couple of times. An actual training event would be where I then get some feedback from you, see where you're at, and the rest of it. I'm just going to frame it as kind of a law enforcement idea. Why do we care about attentional control, and how is it in any way going to help us get better SA, or situational awareness? And so here we go. So a recap of last webinar, and then there's an NTOA webinar I did as well, National Tactical Officers Association webinar. And so both of those are on my website, as well as, of course, the FMIT ones are on the FMIT website. But you can also grab the NTOA one from my website for free as well. And it has some other concepts that go hand in hand with these ones. So recap of last time was learning is a process. Now, what the heck does that mean? Well, it occurs over time, whereas law enforcement currently, I'm not saying you, but law enforcement currently as a whole views training as a check the box. You were OC trained, you were, trained in this thing, and that's not how learning works. Learning is a process that occurs over time. And so the big word there is transfer. So from the last webinar, if you're not familiar with what the heck does this transfer thing mean, well, transfer is the only thing we care about, and that's what actually shows up on the street, which is not, you're not able to measure it during training. That's not a thing. So please go back and take a look at that one. And then for those of you who geek out like me, I'll just throw one paper on there. You can screenshot it, look it up. I believe it's free. If not, just contact me. Complex Motor Learning and Police Training. So if you're at all wondering where this information came from, please contact me. I have many journal articles for you, and those need to be in your lesson plans, in my opinion. So when I help agencies, develop their learning and lesson plans and the rest of it, it's all evidenced or driven through the foundation of these journal articles. Like, this is how people learn faster, and in fact, in even law enforcement, not just in sports. And so there's a great article there. So the purpose of this one, let's just start her off here after 5 minutes of talking already. The purpose of this one is to offer a model. It's called the Quadrants of Attention. There's just a brief little look at it. I'll explain it in a second. So this Quadrants of Attention, number one, why are we going to offer this model of Quadrants of Attention? The sole purpose, I wish the screen was showing me here, the sole purpose of teaching Quadrants of Attention is to then help our people, ourselves and our officers, learn how to direct their attention during rapidly evolving, time-compressed, ambiguous, high-stakes encounters, which is called top-down attentional control. So the sole purpose of this is to practice the skill set of top-down attentional control. I can't make that more clear. That's the second purpose of this entire thing. And so the idea of top-down attentional control is that during these incidents, which are full of multi-sensory stuff, people moving, shouting, high stakes, your partner, the radio, just on and on, driving quickly, whatever that is, I'm trying to help my people filter out, to become an expert performer, to have that game intelligence thing, what is relevant information at that moment, and filter out the rest. That has been the hopeful aftermath of, quote, stress inoculation training, or, quote, they need more reps and things like that. Respectfully, that's not on purpose by design training. In fact, down the road, we'll probably even talk more about that kind of concept of stress inoculation and things of that nature. I'll even touch on it in this one. Respectfully, I just do not approach it the way that I was taught to do it. Former military, law enforcement trainer, literally internationally, and now the framework and models, which is all based in these free webinars, is a way to go about doing it on purpose by design. So the foundation of SA, situational awareness, is attention. This webinar can't be overemphasized. In fact, it's probably going to be very long, and I apologize ahead of time, but it's not a training. This is for you to go back and look. There's basically three big parts of this webinar. The foundation of good SA, of good situational awareness, is attention. If that's the case, officers need to be able to control and move their attention on purpose by design. That is a skill set that needs to be a lesson plan. And respectfully, it's not a lesson plan anywhere I go to. I probably have 5 to 7 lesson plans for skills that we all want them in our officers, but they're not being deliberately taught, and they need to be. So the attentional moving, attentional control is one of those. As with the other webinars I like to hang a question mark, Bertrand Russell. In all things, it's healthy to hang a question mark on something you've long since taken for granted. So I'm asking you, the viewer right now, to just hang a question mark next to, how do you teach situational awareness? How do you teach that? When I ask that question 90+% of the time, it's not a deliberate thing. It's the hopeful residue, aftermath of more training. And that's not purposeful or deliberate. I'm telling you right now, you can train and should, it's a loaded term, but should train situational awareness on purpose by design. Well, how the heck do you go about doing that? I've already told you that the base of it is attention. So typically we're not going to practice till we get it right. We're going to practice till we can't get it wrong. How many times that was said to me during my training, how many times I've said that. People gave me these well-intentioned things of, aim harder, switch on, suck less, right? Or you need stress inoculation. Respectfully, that is not sharp, it's not deliberate, and it certainly isn't a scaffolded approach to teach someone where they're at. From SWAT teams, as I said, happy to work with an NTOA, etc. Going to present at their next conference as well as the TTPOA. Getting into these things now that I'm retiring and doing this full time, but it's not deliberate and purposeful. So, do you have a lesson plan on attentional control? Most likely you don't. I think it's very important to do so. So let's just kind of go from that frame. If you were going to start doing that, what would it look like? Training attention and switching it, very key point, switching your attention between different things, different information, especially in a picture here of a low light situation, etc. That's a skill set, and that is not being taught as a skill set. Like an armbar is a skill set. Well, really, I would kind of disagree a little bit with that. I would say a balanced displacement takedown is a skill set. An armbar is a specific thing. So switching it and teaching that on purpose is something we need to do. A key point for me about the only bit I'm going to talk about was stress inoculation right now, and that's a term I really don't like. I can't inoculate someone against stress. Stress is something that the person feels. Stress is a response from them. I can add pressure to someone, and so the only reason I would add pressure or ramp up the context, the fancy words representative design, or I would then add low light and more flashing lights and more people at scene and more things, is to have them practice two things. The only reason I add pressure to people is so they can practice two things I have already taught them: attentional control and certain breathing techniques. I'm sure you've heard of like the box breathing, for example. I'm a big fan of the cyclic or physiological sigh. Dr. Andrew Huberman. It's a 2-minute video every human being should be exposed to and practice, but especially law enforcement officers. I would never add pressure to someone until I teach them those two things, because the only reason to add pressure is to practice those two things. Attentional control being the first one, hence this webinar. So situational awareness, it's not mystical. The foundation is attention. Attention to what? Task relevant information. That means they're filtering out what isn't. I had a well-intentioned instructor standing next to me shouting, hands, 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 watch their hands. Well, respectfully, if I wish the screen was on me here, but if I was like giving you the double finger or something like that, you know, are my hands super important in this situation? Screw you, come and arrest me, double fingers out in front of you into your face. I mean, they're important, but they're not the most important thing, because you can see they're empty and they're just here. So respectfully, hands all the time is not helping me put together what is important at this moment. Maybe now's a moment I could check that person's belt line for weapons. Maybe now's a moment where I could check the surrounding area, what's in reach. Maybe now's a moment, all the things you do as an expert performer, those of you who are watching this, that our people have not been put in situations to learn how to switch and how to quote unquote gain good SA. So again, training attentional control is a performance skill. Therefore, it must be taught very early in training, and it must be reinforced throughout training. This includes driving, this includes test taking, this includes everything. It should be reinforced through the entire academy, in my opinion. It should be reinforced through all the build-up and continued training if you're a special operations guy, whatever that might be. So how do you teach SA? Right, that would be it. How do you teach? Do you have a lesson plan on attentional control? Well, the first part of teaching good SA is a lesson plan on attentional control. That's why I'm offering this information out to you. There'll be a slide near the end of this that just says, offer these things to your people, each and every person. Here's how you start teaching attentional control. So attention, let's talk about it briefly. It's not an endless thing. You have a limited amount of attention, absolutely. If you're highly focused on something, then you are in effect blind to all the other things going on. Good SA, situational awareness, it's impossible, and I'm telling you this from, as again, tier 1 unit, you know, Top Gun pilot, whatever, you know, expert performer. It is impossible to pay attention to everything all the time. Telling people that's what they need to do, or somehow not conveying actually how to gain good SA, is making it so nebulous. It's a well-intentioned, very bad idea. Our people who need this information, those ones who are on the struggle bus, or those ones who, you know, need a sharpening there, who don't have good emotional regulation, you know, that you and your instructors do, they're the ones who need it the most. So attention can be grabbed at, and that can be very dangerous. There's 3 things to understand about attention. So an attentional grab, a bottom-up, it's just simply called a bottom-up capture or a bottom-up grab of your attention. The picture here dictates it all. Whoa, all of a sudden, you know, you've got something that grabs at your attention, a gun popping in the window of your car. Absolutely, that would do it for me. You know, simple stories we all have and share. I'm cooking in the kitchen many years ago. My daughter, I heard a scream out the front where my daughter was playing, and I heard tires screech, and that grabbed at my attention, and I ran, and I had trouble opening the front door because I still had a frying pan in my hand, thinking my daughter was injured. That was a capture of my attention. I didn't notice anything else going on, So a bottom-up capture is your attention is hijacked, and that happens by shock, novelty, and surprise, which are three tools: shock, novelty, and surprise. I use as a trainer in order to do these things deliberately in training. Bottom-up capture. So an attentional grab or a bottom-up capture. So here's just as one slide from some training I do on cue recognition, on critical things. Notice the shoulder, elbow, and wrist. Well, there's on the left of your screen, there I am grabbing at my cell phone, and on the right of your screen, I've noticed the difference: a 90-degree elbow bend, shoulders a little different, but there's a weapon presentation. Hopefully, if you were to see that 90-degree elbow bend, you would know that's important, recognize that, maybe even start to put your hand on your gun, moving to a better position. But our people aren't noticing and able to filter all the other things going on in that moment to pick up on that elbow angle as critical information. They don't know it exists, rather than where to look, rather than when to look for it. And that would be game intelligence. So that's a grab of their attention. The reason it's called bottom up is simply the brain itself. We've got that, I'll just say that lizard brain at the base of it. And it's the thing that always filters all information for, crap, is this thing going to hurt me or not? So all information gets passed through that. Is it safety? Is it a threat? What's survival? And so if anything shock, novelty, or surprise that our brain maybe wasn't anticipating, hasn't seen before, or something like that, it grabs at the bottom of our brain, and we just call that's why it's called a bottom-up capture, simply put. So now you know. So bottom up, that's what it is. It's a grab. It's an attentional grab, pull. It's not always a bad thing, certainly, as I said in the like with the 90-degree elbow angle, but it can be, because it makes us quote unquote tunnel in or focus on things when perhaps that's not the most important information. I could be standing up close to you in an interview, for example, within reach, and all of a sudden someone shouts, "Sergeant Jones," right? I turn my head, and now that is grabbed at me, but I have to realize, holy crap, I'm standing close to someone, and especially when there's no distance, there's no time, and I have to shift my attention back to that person. Happens while driving all the time. You see something out the side of the vehicle, for example, or something grabs your attention, and the next thing you know, average people don't redirect their attention, and they rear end the car in front of them, or they're just texting and driving. Maybe not a bottom-up capture, that's just a horrible driving practice. And so hence that's slide for you here, because I just want you to understand this idea. Now, what is top-down attentional control, or top-down redirection of our attention? Well, that's the green. That's what we want to practice. I want to practice it so much. They're going to have huge top-down biceps, as it were, muscles on redirecting their attention to what's important right now, what's important next, that WIN principle, WIN, W-I-N, or the task-relevant information. And that has to do with top-down, meaning our frontal lobe circled here, which is what makes us human beings, our frontal lobe, critical thought, and the rest of it, going, hey, that might be something catching my attention while driving, but I'm driving a car, I need to shift my attention back to doing so and monitoring the environment, etc. And so that top-down redirection is what we need to continually practice. And so I coined the phrase, I mean, I've heard it many places, but I love it. I am a professional problem creator. I create problems at 5 pounds on your barbell to redirect your attention, to grab at it like a bottom up, so that you can practice top-down attentional control again. And so top-down is a redirection. For example, here's just a picture of driving into an intersection. We all know that, heaven forbid, you were driving code or something like that, but when you get closer to an intersection, it doesn't matter what the radio is saying, it doesn't matter what the updates on the laptop are, we have to anchor the context of being in a vehicle, driving into an intersection to go, I need to now pay attention to what is going on up here, rules of the road, etc., which means there's no chance, or certainly limited chance, depending on your emotional regulation and attentional focus, that you could even pick up some radio updates or pick up some other things that were happening. And then in turn, I, as a supervisor, am asking my people, when they get to scene, if I don't have closed loop communication, updates weren't read back, etc., to make sure that they got them, because I know they were driving. I know that they are driving to arrive, and their attention cannot be on everything all at once, just as one driving example. So why it matters for us, just what I said. You can't attend to everything all the time. Decisions under pressure require you to pay attention to relevant cues, not just elbow angles, which is absolutely a relevant cue, but at the time they matter. So you can't just say pay attention to elbows all the time or pay attention to hands all the time. I think that's a well-intentioned, not sharp idea. You need to be able to filter back and forth and switch back and forth between these things. So what if you pick the wrong information? Well, we know what happens, right? So there it is, driving code, for example, right? Well, I mean, it ends in catastrophe and accident. That's why it matters. The foundation of situational awareness is paying attention to what is important at that moment, not trying and failing to pay attention to everything. So as I do this simple progression here, this is how I train amazing situational awareness in my people who, quote, don't get it. Attention is number one. Then, and that's what this webinar is about, I'll give you the quadrants model. You already know that this top-down attentional control is the thing. Then from attention, they have to make sense out of it. Meaning, I know that elbow angles are important, elbow and shoulder angles are important from that slide I already showed you. What sense does that make? So when I see it, what could it possibly mean? So they're making sense out of that information, not just that they saw it, but they're making sense and they're making a prediction. So critical information while driving, back to the driving example, would be as you're entering an intersection, we look over and see, is there a little walk guy or a flashing hand? That is a place for a critical cue or clue, the walk guy or the flashing hand, to let us know what? Well, of course, that the light is about to change, perhaps or not. We know to look there. That's just a driving example. Other things, pre-contact, pre-assault cues, but it's also when to look there, and we have to make sense. When I see a flashing hand, 3, 2, 1, the number counting down, now I have options. Do I cover the brake? Do I hit the brake? Do I accelerate? What do I do? That is the very beginning of good SA. So attention, sense making, and why do we have to know where to attend and when, make sense out of it, for what purpose? To make an accurate prediction. I believe it'll be, I think the next webinar is on slip and capture errors, but I think the one after that, or at some point, I just can't remember the order, I'm going to be talking about split-second decision making. That one might even be in May, which is this, predictions, making accurate predictions for the future. I want my people to be able to make split-second accurate predictions for the future to get ahead of them. To what? Number 4, decision, to make a decision on some type of action. So good SA, attention, sense making, accurate predictions, and decisions. Accurate predictions come from giving them a wealth of patterns, a wealth of things that they have experienced, because we can never train, from the last webinar, we can never train our people to be in every situation they're going to be in, ever, because we work in an open environment that's always different. But I can have them in situations like this, and I can have them make a pattern match. I've been in something like this, and this is what is possibly happening. There's weapon acquisition. I noticed he's facing away from me, his hands are in his pockets, the elbow starts to move, and now I'm making a prediction for the future, maybe as to where my position is, concurrent activity, getting a weapon system out, whatever that might be, closing distance, increasing distance, etc. This is how it's trained. And then, of course, after the decision, it's the action. So those 5 steps right there are how you actually train situational awareness. I am very happy to give you so many examples you'll be bored with them, but you tell me the context. Have we got recruits? Have we got in-service? Have we got people not making good decisions while driving, clearing intersections, for example, and getting in accidents while driving quickly? What is it? This is what I do as a profession, but it's all based on this foundation. So there's your slide right there. Situational awareness, training where and how you look and focus your attention, plus how you interpret it, plus switching, flexing between different information. That's the point of it. Why do we care about this quadrants of attention, which I'm going to show you next? Well, because it helps our learners and it helps the trainers. How does it help learners? Well, It helps the learners because I get them to ask. I ask them this question so much that they just start asking it themselves because they know that I'm going to ask it of them. Where's their attention right now? Is it optimal for this task or environment? I don't ask them that in an actual situation, but in training I do all the time. And during a debrief AAR reflection, I ask them, well, tell me about that. You know, what were you attending to? What did you find important when that was taking place with the suspect, or as you were driving, or whatever it was? Again, that's a way of shaping what is important to look at and when, and the sense-making piece. These are the questions that do that. This is how to do that deliberately. And then, of course, it helps trainers. I want to move them from, you know, this quadrant to that quadrant, or I want to, because the whole point is to provide them problems to solve that are right at the edge of their ability. It's called the challenge point framework, where I say 5 pounds on their barbell that day. I want to provide them with some pressure that kind of makes them 30% of the time not quite doing well and 70% of the time kind of getting it. All that's covered in the NTOA webinar, by the way, so please just go back and watch a lot more information on that. And that is useful for a trainer as a framework to know how much pressure to put on this person in this moment, and more importantly, how to have them actually grow from the pressure. It's not just about lifting the weights in the gym. How do we ensure that positive growth is taking place after the weightlifting, not they're going away punishing themselves or not learning to optimize? Again, all that stuff and more is covered in the NTOA webinar. So here's the quadrant model. We can be focused externally, outside of ourselves, or we can be focused internally. There's 2 quadrants. So we can be focused on stuff that's going on inside of our body or outside of our body. Pretty basic. Then we could be focused in a broad way. So let's say external broad, in a broad way, what's going on at the scene, or external narrow, what's going on with that person's elbow angle, for example, in that moment. Then we could be internal broad or internal narrow. I'll just pop some examples up as to what those mean. So there's your 4, there's your quadrants. So external broad, external narrow, internal broad, and internal narrow. So for example, main point here is that you are constantly bouncing around between these 4 quadrants all the time. Experts are doing that, and that's a good thing. Experts, though, know when and what quadrant they're in at the moment, and which quadrant is best to be in. And thirdly, they know how to shift to that proper quadrant and information. That's the skill set. So experts know, maybe not consciously, because expert performers are often the worst at describing how they did it and the rest of it. They're not usually the best instructors I've found, because they just do things really well. And, you know, hence the aim harder, suck less kind of coaching, you know. But bouncing around all 4 of these all the time, experts are doing so during expert performance as well. So know that that's a thing. So external broad, looking outwardly, gathering cues, monitoring the overall environment, right? So contact cover. Contact and cover, which is obviously a foundational principle in law enforcement, is how to manage attention. That's why it exists. I don't think that anyone ever used the quadrants of attention or attentional night of first quadrant model or any of these fancy words to describe it before. But from what I know, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I heard that contact cover kind of originated in California. There was a couple of officers at scene that were dealing with a suspect. Someone else kind of came out of the woodwork or background. Both of these officers were focused external narrow. One of them wasn't monitoring the rest of the environment as a cover officer at the time, and they both got ambushed and killed. So the instructors or the people doing an AAR on it said, if we've got more than one officer at scene, maybe we should kind of split the tasks, relatively speaking. Of course, you can switch, but somebody needs to cover the overall, and somebody needs to pay attention to the external narrow stuff, probably not using those words. So contact cover is how to manage attention. External narrow, you know, you're dialed in, you're focused on face, hands, cues, something of that. External, outside of you, so it's in the environment, and something that is a smaller focus, a narrow focus. Internal broad, so perhaps you're analyzing, reflecting, or planning, or Now know that this is two things, just in the description, or perhaps shock at the presence of a threat. That gun pointed in the window, wasn't expecting it. Whoa! I could go quote unquote internal. Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. That type of idea, which obviously isn't optimal in that moment for expert performance, although internal can be a good place for expert performance as long as it's at the right time. You know, thinking about hitting the door or thinking about serving a warrant as we're rolling up, I might go internal, processing what my tasks and job are, etc. That type of idea. That might be a really good thing to do at that moment, expert performance, but maybe not, you know, in the moment when I'm in an open environment. That term from our previous webinar, one that I have to constantly monitor for changes. And then internal narrow. You're just focused on something inside of yourself, of course, because it's internal, but in a narrow focus. So maybe just on the movement of your trigger finger or on the angle of your elbow or something like that. I'm rarely in that quadrant personally, but I find all four of them useful. This is why these quadrants exist, is so that we can say, hey, every officer, every person, you know, teaching my kids driving, you can be basically in these four quadrants. That gives them a frame of reference, so I can ask them questions like, hey, what quadrant are you in? What are you focusing on? Is it the best quadrant for you? Is it the best information, task relevant information right now? And so this is a way, a foundational principle for just bringing awareness to this in order for them to practice the thing I want. What is the thing I want? Top-down attentional control to task relevant information. That's the thing. So application piece. I realize this isn't an application. This is just me talking. This is an actual training in my mind. But if I were with you right now, I would say, okay, an attention audit. This is something I use all the time, from the highest level performers to the novices. Where's your attention right now? You know, perhaps which quadrant are you in, or what pieces of information, you know, in a snapshot of a video, pause it, for example, or maybe a scenario that took place and we're debriefing it. You know, what did you find important? What are the top 3 things that you found important at this time? That type of idea. And you're shaping their not only their attention, but their sense making. And I would have an expert performer say the same thing after the novice gave their answers, and now that novice and entire groups can be trained all at once to sharpen this. So that's the application piece. I'm happy to talk more about how that is. Yes, you know, I run courses on that. Please, you know, in fact, there's one coming at the end of February in Orlando. So typical errors. We see these things all the time. People are, quote, scanning, right? They're looking around, but they're not attending. There's no meaning being gathered, and there's no sense making happening. We see it all the time on the live fire range. Bang, bang, fire some rounds. Everybody shifts their head left or right. But as instructors, we realize they don't recall anything, they didn't see anything, they're not looking for the purpose of seeing and making sense. Agreed, that is a problem. And so how do we go about solving that? Respectfully, it's not just by the instructor holding up 2 fingers and then the person seeing that and shooting 2 more rounds at the target. We know that they saw me, if that's the case, and then but those 2 fingers being held up, as just one example I've seen, is not the information I want them attending to in the moment. I don't care for them to look around and see someone holding up 2 fingers, and I certainly don't want them to see that and think that now's the time to shoot more rounds. And so that is not representative in design. That is the entire NTOA webinar. Please go back and look at that some more for more on that, and ask me any questions you got. So pulling inside, searching for a response. We see this a lot where people, they kind of go internal is just a word for it. And once I teach the quadrants of attention, my people actually say those things. Hey, so talk to me about what was going on there, because I saw them just not performing, or I saw them hesitant as to transitioning from gun to taser, or whatever that situation was. And I've had my people say, I went totally internal. I just didn't know what I should be doing. Awesome. That's excellent. Thank you for describing that. Now I know that there's a decision-making framework, a sense-making piece, and all of those things can be sharpened by me now. Otherwise, I'm just kind of guessing what's inside their head or why they're doing what they're doing. It's not deliberate and purposeful. I just, quote, used to throw more training at them and hope they were gonna swim, not sink. And that's gone for me now. And then another one would be fixating, right? Fixating on the face, fixating on the hands, fixating on the whatever it was, and missing some other very relevant cues. We see this all the time. I'm sure you've done a vehicle stop training, for example, where there's a gun on the dash or something, and your officers didn't even notice it or something. There's some plain view kind of thing because they were worried about, worried or not worried, they were focusing and fixating on the driver, for example, or something like that, just as one example so that we're kind of on the same page. So how do you fix those things? As I've said, the application piece, one of them is an attention audit. Just call it that. Where's my attention right now? Is it optimal for this environment? Is it optimal for this task, this situation? And start to ask that question. You're shaping their intention. What is it I'm trying to do in this next run or practice, whether that's a shooting thing or a scenario thing? You shape their intention. And the second thing is you shape their attention. That's how to train people deliberately. So this is the slide to please take a screenshot of. There's these 6 little things here. So I believe personally, and I do this everywhere professionally, that every officer should be trained on this stuff. What is it? Introduce them to the quadrant model. Number 1, demonstrate it via scenario, video, whatever it is. Talk about it. Don't talk at them. Poll with questions. Where do you think they're at? What do you think is important right now watching this video? Pause it at certain points, that type of idea. And then, of course, there's a learner self-assessment. What quadrant are you in, or what do you find important, so that they can start to learn how to deliberately shift their attention. Drill designs, right? So I design things on the room entry. The number 2 gets grabbed at and goes to the ground with an opposition guy. And the number 1, who's got his area of responsibility, might turn his head and look down. Shock, novelty, and surprise. Oh crap, I never thought of that before. I never had experienced that before. That's excellent. I see him not doing the job he needs to be doing, and I need him to hopefully catch himself and shift his eyes and attention back to his weapon system, his area of responsibility, etc. as the number 1. If he doesn't, then we debrief that and he runs through it, and that was hopefully 5 pounds on his barbell that day. That's just one professional problem I create as a bottom-up capture, so that person, that officer can can practice top-down redirection of their attention. And then, of course, through the debrief, number 5, and reflection. What will you do next time? And not just what will you do, but have them physically do it. Hey, on that entry, yeah, I looked over here, and oh, the next thing you know, I turned back and missed a bunch of stuff. Well, I don't want to put too much pressure on that number 1. It doesn't do any good for a role player to come out and shoot at him 15 times. That's not going to help him, but if he looks back and, oh crap, all of a sudden there's a threat standing in front of him, he's going to catch himself. That's 5 pounds in his bar without breaking him, just as an example as to how I add pressure. So I offer this to you. If you have any questions on it, contact me. I'm happy to give you specifics, but here's the training I think you should offer everyone. So how do you build cues? So we've got a picture here of these guys doing a whatever it is, maybe an officer down rescue or something like that. Build in the cues as we're moving, right? I have my people start to make cues for themselves. A cue is just something to like trigger or have them snap into a thought or in fact, cues probably in weightlifting, for example, right? Extend your hips. If you're doing a power movement, maybe with a barbell. Well, here's 3 that I really enjoy. They've worked quite well. Eyes and ears out, right? So we're moving down the hallway, eyes and ears out, right? Boom. Okay, cheek weld, whatever it is. Got my weapon system, eyes and ears out. What else? Okay, so meaning what else just simply is to cue them to keep looking for more stuff. I say many times, what's the purpose of cover, right? Just get behind something to stop, impair, impede, direct or indirect fire. Great, I love it. But I would like them to think the purpose of cover is to look for better cover because it keeps them mentally engaged. What else? What else? What else? What else is happening? How could I be in a better position? That type of idea, to stay mentally engaged and processing more information, not to get quote unquote tunneled in or just stay processing. All 3 of those cues have worked. How you develop a cue is important. That would be in another webinar, but here I'll just offer you those. I have the one, don't get tunneled at the bottom here, and I don't have it in green because I'm not a big fan of negatives. Don't get tunneled I want to talk about what I do want, not what I don't want. But some people find that of value. Absolutely use it. If it works for you, if it works for your people, awesome. I would rather, instead of don't get tunneled, I would have them stay processing. I would have them eyes and ears out versus thinking of the negative, getting tunneled in. I don't want them to think of that at all. Colonel Grossman really sharpened me on that, with that language of aim small, miss small. I said, I don't like that sentence, Colonel. He said he didn't like it either. He said, why are we talking about missing at all? Aim precise, be precise, right? Shape the brain for what you do want. So that's why I have that one in a yellow there. All right, so coming to the end here, I know it's just me talking at you with a whole bunch of stuff, but I hope that you find it of value. Summary of the key points. Attentional shifting is a skill set. Please look to practice it. I want my people to have, massive biceps on attentional control, on the redirecting, on the number one, catching themselves, not focused on the right information in the right quadrant, for example, and redirecting it instantly to the right information. But that is just the beginning. They have to make sense out of it, make a pattern match, a prediction, make a decision and action. And all of that has to happen in the blink of an eye. That is what I do professionally. And so if you want to have a sharper conversation about what that looks like real time, I'm happy to do so. In order to have attentional control, it requires self-awareness, hence the quadrant model, just as a model to give them a framework for knowing that their attention could be like in one of 4 areas, for example, and hopefully they find that useful because you're going to direct them as a trainer. Use this to train my kids how to drive. Right? What are they focused on at what moment? Is it the best information or not? And that's how we have a deliberate, on purpose by design, hence the name of my company, training of this. The foundation of situational awareness is awareness. And so the directing and redirecting of attention. Boom, there's your key points like that. So the implications for this are, trainers, look at your upcoming sessions. What are you teaching? Could be live fire stuff, could be defensive tactics, driving, it could be a law test, it could be anything. Do an attentional state audit. If all of a sudden I walk in, or I have my instructors will walk in and throw down a pop quiz in, on search and seizure doctrine or something like that, I go, hey, where are you breathing? What are you focusing on? Because that's pressure. And the only way, or the only reason I believe you should add pressure is for them to practice breathing and attentional focus. We're trying to help them catch themselves all the time and optimize those states. So look at any training you've got coming up. Can you put in a little, hey, what are you attending to? What do you find important? Or maybe you've got such novice learners, I would have one of you people, like you expert performers, you instructors out there, go and do the thing, whatever that is, the shoot, the, I don't know, whatever the skill set is. I would then talk to you about those things as you move through it again in a debrief, having all of my new learners see and hear that, and you're immediately starting to shape them. So that's a huge way of just gaining so much early context and representative design, again, the fancy words from the NTOA webinar, into whatever it is you're doing. I'm not a big fan. I don't believe we need more stuff. I'm not really looking to change your lesson plans. I'm looking to have you kind of dial in how you present them and to get way more transfer, to way more on the street application in a good way. And then of course, so quadrant cues and number 3 scenarios that require switching. And so we were just having a discussion yesterday, local agency, changed over holsters, changed over retention devices on their holsters, new pistols, things like that. And I have a very specific way of going about training a new holster, a new gun, heaven forbid it was a new red dot or not, or a new light or something like that, for slip and capture errors, which I believe, I'm looking on the board, actually slip and capture will be the next thing I talk about in the next webinar. But something we have to understand big time in our profession, because there's a lot of liability that can be around that. And slip and capture errors are predictable, and therefore they're greatly preventable. And so anyway, so that'll be an important webinar to come, but that's the same idea. It's attention. So situational awareness. I know I've hit the nail many times with this, but I really want to leave you with this idea. It's attention, sense making, accurate predictions, and decisions, so actions, right? So decide and act. The foundation is attention. Okay, you're not going to, you're going to greatly decrease the time it takes you to train someone to have better, in fact, amazing SA by even understanding attention and the redirection and focusing of their attention as a foundation for it. I won't, don't trust me on it. Try it for yourself, but I'll bet my paycheck double or nothing. So, for example, scanning, suspect moving, decisions, actions, and then recall, right? The things that you're doing, just add these words, these phrases, these attention audits, things like that into it, into the training you're already doing. It would be an immediate gain. Start with the critical information. So if I'm learning the holster conversion, for example, so now we're taking over a new holster. I've got, in-service training, police officers who are already trained and work in the streets. Personally, I would start them with like drawdown drills, competition-like drills on the new holster, where they're ballistically, dynamically moving, early one-handed fire out to two-handed, all sorts of gamified, massive amounts of purposeful play where their attention is solely focused on why to get a gun out, when to get a gun out, how much to shoot, when to shoot, how all the things I want them focused on in the future while they're trying to learn, quote unquote, this new holster. The old me used to have them just practice the new holster a million times, and even the reason to get it out wasn't even anything. It was just me saying draw or on a pack timer. And that was a well-intentioned bad idea if transfer is what we're after, which we are. That's the sole purpose. Training them to understand and do their holster with a part of the brain in one area, and then thinking it's going to carry over into another area when they're focused on completely other things, perhaps a bottom-up capture, shock, novelty, or surprise. I'm on the ground. How do I get a gun out now? The high degree of variability in physical, your body posture, fighting with someone. That's what I thrive in training people to do. That's what we're going to be doing. I'll throw it out there again in February in Orlando, 2026, in that 3-day class. So typically law enforcement starts off out of context, which is simply put, the research is clear, and I'm sure you've seen it yourself. It's just not optimal. The NTOA webinars all on that. And so here is that NTOA webinar on my website, Tactical Excellence on Purpose by Design. And then it talks about space practice, the law of specificity, and this learning zone, the illusion of learning, which is on my website, but also